Braden Dorsey stood silently in front of the faded mirror in the employee locker room, the harsh flicker of a worn-out fluorescent light buzzing above him. He adjusted the fake mustache clinging awkwardly to his upper lip. It itched terribly. The cheap prescription glasses pinched the bridge of his nose, and the hastily dyed brown hair felt foreign, like he was stepping into someone else's skin. Every element of the disguise made him uncomfortable, but it was necessary. In the reflection, there was no sign of the man who had inherited an 11-store fried chicken chain from his late father. There was no custom-tailored suit, no polished watch, no air of authority. Just a cheap plastic name tag that read Nate, a made-up resume, and the look of someone just trying to survive their shift. Since stepping into the role of CEO, Braden had spent most of his time sealed inside sterile conference rooms, buried under spreadsheets and revenue reports. The further he climbed into the structure of the company, the more disconnected he had become from its beating heart. Once, he believed it was the cost of responsibility. Now, he wasn't so sure. Something had been bothering him, something about Store 6 in Franklin, Indiana. On paper, it didn't scream disaster. Sales were average, customer flow was steady, but the turnover rate was more than double any other location, and the customer complaints, they were vague, unsettling. Slow service, cold food, rude employees, but never specific enough to pinpoint the problem. When he brought it up, the district manager just shrugged and blamed staffing shortages, a tired, overused excuse, like tossing a blanket over a crack in the foundation and pretending the house wasn't shaking. Braden had heard that line too many times. He didn't trust it anymore. His instincts, dormant from years of desk-bound leadership, were waking up. He had to see it for himself. Store 6 had never met him. His father had run the business in a distant, hands-off fashion, never visiting a location unless something was literally on fire. Braden had followed that example, until now. He told the store manager he was a new hire, part of a rarely used corporate training program. It was just obscure enough to work. The manager, a tall, sharp-tongued guy named Rick, barely looked up from his phone before tossing a grease-stained black apron at him. "We're already too short today. Grab the apron and let's go." Braden took a deep breath, pulled the apron over his head, and stepped into a world he hadn't seen in over a decade. The stench of burnt grease clung to everything. The fryers hissed with frustration, their metal casings dented and scarred from years of overuse. The air was thick, humid with oil and exhaustion. It had been more than 10 years since Braden had worked on his feet. Back in high school, flipping burgers at a local joint to earn gas money, by mid-morning his arms ached with the dull, unforgiving burn of muscles not used this way in years. And that wasn't all. It wasn't just his body that was being tested, it was his conscience. While he was prepping vegetables, a young woman working next to him leaned in and spoke in a low, cautious voice, barely above a whisper. "Watch your step over by the sink. The floor's warped. I've almost rolled my ankle twice this week." Braden glanced down. The tile near the sink was cracked and bulging upward. It looked like moisture had seeped underneath, swelling the concrete until the surface buckled. He turned toward the girl, early 20s, petite, with dark hair tucked under a worn-out baseball cap. Her name tag read Eliza. "Has anyone tried to fix it?" he asked under his breath. She gave a dry laugh, the kind that carried more resignation than amusement. "Rick said not to worry about it, said it's not a real problem unless someone actually gets hurt." Braden frowned. A chill ran down his back like a warning. "That doesn't sound safe." "No kidding," she muttered. "Last week, Jorge slipped and bruised his hip. Rick just told him to walk better." Braden looked over at Rick, who was slumped against the back counter, still glued to his phone. A delivery guy walked through the door. Rick didn't even flinch. Eliza caught his gaze, and it roasted the Times headline. "He doesn't do anything. Seriously. Yesterday he left a fryer on and went out for a smoke. Oil overflowed, nearly caused a fire. Half of us are scared to say anything because he cuts your hours if you complain. Braden's stomach turned. A sickening mix of anger and guilt tightened his chest. What about upper management? He asked carefully. Has anyone tried reporting him? Eliza looked at him like he had asked if gravity still worked. The district manager's his drinking buddy. They're tight. Nobody's listening. Braden didn't answer. He just nodded and went back to slicing pickles. But each slice came with more force than the last. His jaw clenched. His chest tightened. He hadn't even made it to lunch, and already he knew. This wasn't just a bad manager. This was rot. Deep and systemic. He didn't have to wait long for proof. Just before the lunch rush, a fry oil container was knocked over near the warped tile. No one cleaned it up. Rick had disappeared again. Eliza's foot slipped. Her body jerked forward, but she managed to catch herself just in time by grabbing the prep counter. She stood trembling, wide-eyed, trying to pretend nothing had happened. "Jesus," Braden muttered, hurrying over. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said breathlessly, brushing off her apron. "But this is getting stupid. Someone's going to break a bone, and then what?" A fire roared in Braden's chest. Every instinct screamed for him to shut the place down, to fire Rick on the spot. But he forced himself to hold back. He needed to know just how far this had spread, how bad it really was. The shift dragged to a close. As the last orders were boxed and bagged, Rick clapped his hands together like a showman wrapping up a stage act. "Good job today, everyone. Except you, Eliza. You were dragging. If you're too tired, don't bother coming in tomorrow." Eliza froze. Her shoulders tensed and her eyes dropped to the floor. "I'm not tired," she said quietly. Rick waved her off. "Don't bother. Save it." He turned and disappeared into the office, the door slamming shut behind him. Braden stood there, watching her expression, calm but dimmed, like she'd learned to absorb this kind of treatment and survive it in silence. But she shouldn't have to. And tomorrow, he would make sure she wouldn't. "Save it," Rick snapped, cutting her off before turning his back and walking into the office. The door slammed shut behind him with a force that echoed through the room. Braden's eyes lingered on Eliza's face. Stoic, composed, hardened even, but her eyes told a different story. She wasn't unaffected. She was just used to being dismissed, used to being threatened. That kind of resilience wasn't strength, it was survival, and she shouldn't have had to live like that. He stepped outside and sat on the curb in front of the store. His back ached. His shoes were soaked in fryer grease. The smell of the kitchen, burnt oil, pressure, and quiet injustice clung to him like smoke. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Need every maintenance and safety report from Store 6 for the last 6 months. And Rick's HR file." "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," Braden exhaled. "But I will be. I'm going back tomorrow." The next morning he arrived earlier than before. Rick wasn't there yet. Eliza was sweeping near the drive-through window. "You all right?" Braden asked. "Better than yesterday. Thanks for stepping in. I saw you try to help." Braden looked her straight in the eye, his voice steady and sincere. "You shouldn't have to work in fear." Eliza gave a small, almost shy smile. "Yeah, but that's just how it is." "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's not how it should be." Rick showed up late again. As he walked past Braden, he muttered, under his breath, "Still here, new guy? Let's hope you're faster today." Braden followed him into the stockroom. "You know the floor by the sink is a serious hazard, right?" Rick didn't bother to turn around. "It's been like that forever. Jorge got hurt. Eliza almost fell." Rick scoffed. "They're clumsy. You new hires always think you know better than everyone else." Braden stepped in closer. What if someone breaks their leg? Rick shrugged with a smirk. Then maybe next time they'll watch where they walk. Brayden stared at him, silent, long enough for the air between them to turn cold and heavy. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to the kitchen, finishing the shift like any other crew member. He saw Jorge limping, saw Eliza helping others without being asked, saw Rick disappear again, this time for more than an hour. By the time closing came, Brayden had made his decision. The next morning, he parked farther from the building to avoid being recognized. The sky was still dark. The air was thick with dew and the diesel scent of passing trucks. He sat in the car for a moment, tightening his tie, straightening his blazer. No fake mustache, no cheap apron, no name tag that read Nate. This time, he walked in as himself, Brayden Dorsey, the actual owner. He entered through the front door. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The cashier froze mid-wipe, eyes wide. A cook peeked out from the kitchen, confused. Then Rick emerged from the office, still slipping on his jacket. His forced smile never reached his eyes. "Morning. What brings you in so early?" Brayden's voice was calm, firm. "I'm Brayden Dorsey. I own this place. We need to talk now." The room fell silent. Only the hum of the refrigerators filled the space. Rick stiffened. His eyes darted nervously. "Well, of course. Let's head to the office." Brayden followed him down the narrow hallway, still faintly smelling of cigarette smoke. Rick moved to close the office door. "Leave it open," Brayden said. Rick hesitated, then stepped aside. Brayden remained standing. "I've been working here for the last 2 days undercover. I saw what goes on in this store." Rick blinked, startled. "Sir, I think there's been some misunderstanding. We've been short-staffed. I've been doing my best." "You walked out during peak lunch hours with no notice. A fryer overflowed and no one knew how to shut it down. You threatened to cut a staff member's hours because she wasn't moving fast enough. You ignored safety risks that have clearly been there for weeks." Rick's tone shifted, defensive. "This isn't a Hilton, it's fast food. You want smoother operations? Then give me more staff." Brayden didn't flinch. "You're managing through fear. That's not leadership, that's negligence." Rick bristled. "Kids these days don't listen. If you don't push them, they do nothing. They're on their phones half the time." Brayden stepped closer, his voice low and sharp. "Owned employee nearly fell. Another is walking with a limp. And I reviewed every maintenance report this morning. There wasn't a single work order filed. Not one." "You didn't even try." Rick looked away, his jaw twitching with frustration. "You're fired," Brayden said. "Effective immediately." Rick scoffed. "You're firing me just like that?" "I'm not firing you. I'm holding you accountable. Your replacement starts tomorrow. HR will be in touch today." Rick said nothing. Slowly, he collected a few files and a half-used bottle of aspirin. He didn't meet Braden's eyes. Brayden walked back out to the front. The staff had begun to gather, pretending to clean or organize while sneaking wary glances. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Brayden Dorsey. I own this company. I've been working here the past 2 days under a different name. I saw what you've all been dealing with, and I'm sorry. That ends today." No one moved. Eliza stood near the drive-through window, arms crossed. Jorge leaned against the prep counter, blinking like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Rick is no longer employed here. An interim manager will arrive tomorrow. Today, I'll be working with you." The room felt frozen. Then Eliza spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Is this real? You're really the owner?" Brayden nodded. "Yes." She glanced at Jorge, then back at Brayden. "When did you go undercover?" Brayden held her gaze, his voice low and honest. "Because I stopped trusting second-hand reports. I had to see it for myself." Jorge let out a dry, tired sigh, half sarcasm, half truth. Took you long enough. Raiden stepped closer. You were right. I should have come sooner. An older woman near the fryer station raised her hand slightly, her voice filled with concern. What about the floor? It's still dangerous. The repair crew will be here this afternoon, Braden replied. I already made the call. A single clap echoed from the back of the kitchen. Then another. Braden held up his hand to stop them. I'm not here for applause. I'm here to rebuild trust. And I'm going to earn that. One day at a time. He turned to Eliza. Can we talk before your shift starts? Eliza nodded and followed him to the break area in the back, a small space that smelled faintly of burnt plastic and stale coffee. Braden leaned against the wall, his tone steady but serious. You spoke up when no one else would. That takes courage. Eliza shrugged. I didn't feel brave. I was just tired of pretending like everything was normal. Braden was quiet for a moment, then asked, What made you stay? I have a younger brother in college, Eliza said softly. I help pay his tuition, and honestly, I've had worse managers. At least Rick didn't yell every single day. Braden tilted his head slightly, his expression tinged with sadness. That's a pretty low bar. Eliza gave a faint laugh, but there was bitterness in it. Yeah, but when you don't have many choices, you get used to low bars. Braden nodded slowly. You shouldn't have to live like that. Eliza looked him straight in the eye. So what now? Are things really going to change? We're bringing in a new manager. Someone who listens, Braden said. And I'd like to offer you a shift lead position. Higher pay, more decision-making power. Her eyes widened. But I've only been here 8 months. I saw the way the team followed your lead. That counts more than tenure in my book. Eliza crossed her arms, thinking, what if I say no? Then nothing changes for you. You keep your current role. I'm not pressuring you. She studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. I'll think about it. That's fair, Braden said with a smile. They returned to the kitchen. The energy had changed. The team moved faster, but with focus rather than fear. It was as if someone had finally lifted a boot off their necks. They weren't just working, they were breathing. That afternoon, Braden sat in a corner booth with a clipboard in hand, taking time to talk to each employee one-on-one. He asked what they needed, what wasn't working, and what they would fix if they had the power to change things. A high schooler named Tia suggested rearranging the prep area to reduce unnecessary walking. Marquez, a quiet line cook, pointed out that the walk-in fridge leaked water and sometimes froze the lettuce. Jorge asked for padded anti-fatigue mats at the fryer stations to ease joint pain. Braden wrote down every comment, every suggestion without skipping a single detail. When the repair crew arrived, he personally walked them to the warped flooring and stayed to observe, not because he doubted their work, but because he wanted his team to see that it mattered to him. That night, after the last customer left, Braden stayed behind and helped mop the floors. No big speeches, no grand gestures, just standing shoulder to shoulder with the crew, doing the work. When they finished, Eliza approached with a small tray of freshly fried chicken. Made this before we shut off the fryers, she said. It's not much, but thank you. Raiden accepted the tray with a nod. Best meal I've had all week. Eliza smiled, then hesitated. I'll take the shift lead position. Raiden met her eyes, his voice warm. I'm really glad to hear that. Jorge walked by, flipping off a few of the lights, and said casually, This place feels different now. Braden nodded slowly. It does, and this is only the beginning. That night, Braden barely slept. His body ached in places he hadn't felt in years, but his mind was even more restless. How many other stores were like this? The next morning, he returned to store 6. Not as the suited CEO, not as Nate, the undercover rookie, but as himself. Braden Dorsey, wearing a simple navy polo with the company logo stitched over his heart and a clipboard tucked under one arm. He wasn't there to observe anymore. He was there to rebuild. The interim manager arrived right on time. Carla, a woman with over a decade of experience, known for running 3 successful stores with fairness, structure, and compassion. Braden had spoken with her the night before. "Good morning," she said as she walked in, glancing around at the prepping staff. "You must be Eliza." "That's me," Eliza replied. Carla handed her a laminated badge. A shift lead badge. First time wearing one always feels weird. You'll get used to it. Braden watched as Eliza clipped it on. She didn't say much, but she stood a little taller. Carla turned to Braden. "I want to meet everyone one-on-one. I don't care if it takes all day." "Good," Braden said. "That's what they need." By midday, Carla had reorganized the prep area and reassigned tasks for the lunch rush. She didn't bark orders. She worked side by side with the team, explaining every adjustment clearly. When Devin, a wiry cashier, started panicking under the pressure of a long customer line, Carla stepped in, worked the register beside him, and coached him through each transaction. Her presence didn't overwhelm, it empowered. Braden stood off to the side, watching. This was what leadership looked like. Not fear, not silence, but presence. Early that afternoon, he called Eliza over. "Need your help with something." She raised an eyebrow. "What kind of help?" "I want to talk to Jorge, but I don't want to pull him away from the kitchen if he's not comfortable." "He's in the walk-in checking inventory," she said. "I'll let him know." Eliza nodded. "He's checking inventory in the walk-in. I'll let him know." A few minutes later, Jorge stepped out, wiping his hands on a towel. "You wanted to see me?" "Take a seat," Braden said, pointing to the chair. "I'm not going to ask how your leg is. I know it's still bothering you." He paused. "What I want to know is, what do you need?" Jorge looked surprised. "No one's ever asked me that before." "And think about it," Braden said calmly. "Honestly," Jorge exhaled, "I need a few days off. Not because I'm lazy, but I've been pulling double shifts, limping the whole time. If I don't rest soon, it's only going to get worse." Braden nodded. "All right. You'll take 4 days off, fully paid. When you're back, you'll wear a compression brace, company issued." Jorge's eyes widened. "Serious?" "Seriously. And every work area is getting anti-slip mats, not just the fryer station." Jorge went quiet for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "I didn't expect this." "Neither did I," Braden replied. "But I'm learning. Fast." Later that day, Braden walked around the store with a facilities contractor. The roof showed early signs of water damage, and a deep rut in the delivery zone nearly twisted his ankle. "How long will it take to repair?" Braden asked. 3 days, the contractor replied. "We can work overnight to avoid disrupting operations." "Start this weekend. Bill me directly," Braden said without hesitation. When he returned to the kitchen, he found Carla flipping through maintenance logs. "These records are a mess," she said. "No follow-ups, no updates. Like someone just gave up halfway." "That's not far off," Braden admitted. "We're not just fixing one store, we're fixing the system that allowed this to happen." "I'll draft a new reporting process," Carla replied. "Every issue logged with timestamps, photos, and full descriptions. If someone skips the process, they answer for it. I'll add a direct review line to your office. And if a district manager hasn't responded within 72 hours, I want to know." By the time the dinner rush hit, the store was running more smoothly than it had in weeks. Carla was present, but never overbearing. Eliza coordinated the team with quiet confidence. Devin, the nervous kid who once flinched at every customer, was now cracking jokes while ringing up orders. Braden didn't mop floors that night. He sat at a small table in the back, opened his laptop, and began typing the first few lines of a memo to the entire leadership team. The subject line was simple. From now on, we do things differently. The kitchen lights dimmed gradually. The sharp scent of fryer grease had faded, replaced by lemon cleaner. And something more meaningful, a sense of trust starting to take root. Carla peeked her head in. I've scheduled individual interviews with every staff member, totally voluntary, but everyone's signed up. Good, Braden said. How's Eliza doing? Sharp instincts, Carla replied. Knows when to lean in, when to step back, but more importantly, she has something rare. What's that? Baby, trust her. Braden closed his laptop slowly. I do too. Carla studied him for a moment. You planning to visit the other stores? I'm not waiting for reports anymore, Braden said. I'm going to visit each location quietly, and then we'll make changes. Carla nodded. Some people are going to get nervous. Militia. She stepped out, but paused in the doorway. You're not like your father. Braden looked away for a second, thoughtful. No, and I think he'd be okay with that. Near midnight, Braden pulled into the lot. He spotted Eliza sitting on the curb, hoodie pulled over her head, sipping a soda. He rolled down his window. Still here? Waiting on the bus, she replied. This late? It only comes once an hour. I'll make sure the company covers rideshare stipends for closing staff, Braden said. You shouldn't be waiting out here alone. Eliza gave him a small half-smile, tinged with teasing. If you keep this up, we might actually start to believe you care. Braden didn't smile. His voice was quiet, serious. I do. But I know that doesn't mean anything unless I prove it. Eliza stood, dusting off her hoodie. So far, you're proving it. Braden nodded once, then slowly pulled away. As the store faded in his rearview mirror, he wasn't just leaving behind a shift. He was making a decision about the company as a whole. Company culture wasn't something printed in a mission statement. It was something built, shift by shift, decision by decision, and it started at the top. And from that moment on, Braden knew exactly how he was going to lead. The next morning, he stood in front of a newly mounted operations board in the hallway behind Store 6, watching each team member place their magnet under their task for the day. It was Carla's idea. A simple, visual, and public system. No guessing, no overlapping duties while someone else stood around, idle. Over the past 2 days, Braden had worked side by side with the team to implement practical upgrades. New headset units, an auto-filtering fryer, and a precision temperature-controlled prep cooler to replace the one that had been freezing everything from coleslaw to raw chicken. All updates were logged publicly, and each entry had to be confirmed by 2 people, one of whom had to be working the shift. That was Carla's idea, and Braden had approved it without hesitation. He stood leaning against the walk-in cooler door, scanning the morning crew's whiteboard notes. At the very bottom, someone had written in green marker, "Cooler door seals louder than usual. Might be nothing." Braden pulled out his phone and immediately added a task for the next day. Inspect cooler door seal. Possible compressor issue. Eliza walked up, tucking her receipt pad into her apron. I've got a question, she said, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. About the other stores. Are you planning to do what you did here, the disguise and all? Braden shook his head. No. That only works once. It helped me see the symptoms, but not the root cause. So what's the plan? I'm starting a rotating internal audit team, Braden explained. Surprise visits, anonymous interviews, safety evaluations. But every region will also have a permanent liaison, not to police, to listen. Eliza raised an eyebrow. And who chooses the liaisons? They'll be selected from the stores, not corporate. he said. People who've worked the floor, not just read the reports. And they'll report directly to you? They'll have direct access to me, yes. But more importantly, they'll be empowered to act without waiting for permission. Eliza nodded slowly. Might actually work. Braden glanced toward the counter where Devon, the young cashier, was wiping the touchscreen. He still moved with a bit of hesitation, like he expected to be corrected at any moment, but his shoulders weren't as tense as before. I know this won't fix everything, Braden said, but I'm fixing the part I can control. Eliza tilted her head. What about Rick? Is that whole thing over? He's been referred to compliance, Braden answered. Violation of safety protocols, falsified maintenance records, retaliation against staff. The process has already started. Eliza ran her fingers along the edge of the prep table. You're not going to announce it, are you? No, Braden said. I believe in accountability, but I don't believe in making a spectacle just to prove a point. Quiet consequences are still consequences. A Friar buzzer chimed. Eliza turned to walk away, then paused. Most people in your position, after they apologize, they vanish. They fix the optics, then disappear. But you're still here. I'll be back next week, Braden said. Not to hover, to learn. After the shift ended, Braden returned to the small back office Carla had turned into her temporary desk. She walked in and dropped a folder on the table. 3 resignations. Braden looked up sharply. From other stores, she clarified. Word's getting around. Some of the worst managers are getting nervous. He opened the folder, 1 from Illinois, 1 from Missouri. All 3 had previously been flagged for high turnover. I think quitting gets them off the hook. Maybe, Carla replied. But it's a start. Braden closed the folder. Leadership review every resignation. If there's evidence of misconduct, we follow through. If they left clean, we let it go. Carla picked up her phone. You've got a video call in 20 store too. They want to talk about their closing protocol. They still safe? Yes, but they're requesting a schedule change. Right now they close with only 2 people. The backlot lighting doesn't reach the exit. Braden stood. Install additional lights, and from now on, minimum of 3 closers, no exceptions. Carla nodded and entered the note into her phone. You're changing a lot at once. That's exactly the point, Braden replied. That afternoon, Braden stood outside by the delivery entrance, watching the final layer of asphalt get pressed into place. The air still smelled like fresh tar and crisp white paint. He glanced at the newly drawn directional arrows for delivery trucks and nodded to himself. Small things, but small things add up. Inside, Jorge was stacking boxes in the stockroom. How's the leg? Braden asked. Better, Jorge said. Still stiff, but I can stand without it locking up. Carla told me you asked to change roles next week. Yeah, I don't want to be back on the Friar yet. I asked to do stock rotation and morning prep instead. Smart call, Braden said. That's your decision to make. Jorge looked at him, a little surprised. You're not going to push me back onto the line? No, Braden said simply. We hired you to work, not to wear yourself out. Jorge gave a small nod, then turned back to his task. The atmosphere in the store had shifted again. Not just smoother, quieter, steadier. People weren't shouting across the kitchen anymore. They were talking to one another, actually connecting. That night, Braden reviewed 3 new policy drafts, approved a new uniform supplier recommended by the crew, and finalized the rotating liaison schedule. Every decision had been vetted by someone from the floor. As the last employee clocked out, Braden stood near the front door. Eliza walked past, tugging on her hoodie. Carla's good, she said. She is, Braden agreed. And she told me you're starting the leadership development program. Yeah. 3 months. Communication, budgeting, conflict resolution. If you finish, it'll count toward promotion eligibility. Eliza pulled her sleeve down, suddenly self-conscious. You put me in the first round? You were already on the list. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I never thought someone like me would be on a list like that. Raiden folded his arms. People like you are the reason this place runs. That's exactly who should be on it. She looked at him, gave a small nod, then walked out. Raiden shut off the lights and locked the door behind her. The next morning, he wasn't at store 6. He was already halfway across the state, walking into another location. No disguise, no fake glasses, no plastic name tag. Just a clipboard, a simple introduction, and one question he planned to ask at every store from now on. What's happening here that no one's talking about? And this time, he was ready to listen.